So first impressions count for a lot where basically anything is concerned, and that is certainly true of movies. We've only got so much time in our lives to watch them, sadly, and so we'll typically base our viewing decisions off of a trailer or, in a rush, maybe just a quick glimpse of a poster. We make all of our assumptions about movies from their marketing, yet when you sit down and actually watch a film for yourself, it can turn out to be a much more complex, mature, and downright fascinating spectacle than you ever imagined. Hell, perhaps you actually sat through the movie and didn't even glean its true depth until you revisited it years later, with its more subtle and intriguing context finally laid bare. So let's take a look at some films that maybe we were too quick to judge or maybe just didn't appreciate until many, many moons later. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 insane movies that are way deeper than they look. Number 10. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Everything Everywhere All at Once is one of the year's most buzzed about films, and that's not simply because it's an indie take on the multiverse movie that is fast becoming a subgenre in of itself. If the marketing perhaps painted the film as a wacky with a capital W genre-bending sci-fi action flick, do not let that fool you. This is one of the most richly character-driven movies of the year so far. At its core, the film is a nuanced study of a family in crisis, led by a wife and mother who stands as a monument to unfulfilled promise, and whose downtrodden life ironically ends up making her the perfect candidate to save the multiverse. For all of its wild action sequences, googly eyes, and creative uses of butt plugs, it is a thoroughly existential piece of work which soundly rejects hopeless nihilism. When her daughter Joy feels the existence of the endless universes means that nothing matters, her husband refutes this, encouraging them to both embrace kindness and optimistic nihilism, that the lack of intrinsic meaning in life need not be a bad thing. It's a profound and unexpected message for a multiverse movie to offer up, and a sound rebuke to anyone who feels that the Marvel Cinematic Universe's recent multiversal romps are, well, a bit soulless and empty. Everything Everywhere All at Once being as smart and perceptive as it is shouldn't actually be all that surprising though, given that the filmmakers Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert previously wrung profundity from Swiss Army Man, a film about Daniel Radcliffe's farting corpse. Number 9. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. To the casual observer, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge is a relatively standard issue horror sequel, albeit one that follows the deranged plotline of Freddy Krueger attempting to possess the body of a high schooler. Though opinion on Freddy's Revenge continues to vary wildly amongst the fanbase, and most will agree it's nowhere near the quality of Wes Craven's original, it has enjoyed a reassessment in recent years for its homoerotic subtext. Many have come out suggesting that Jesse's literal struggle for his own bodily agency against Freddy makes the film a metaphor for coming out, compounded by a scene where he's tormented by Coach Schneider for visiting a gay bar, only for the coach to then be suggestively killed by Freddy in the school showers. This is especially interesting as actor Mark Patton, who played Jesse, was himself a closeted gay man at the time, and though the writer of the project spent years denying that the gay subtext was intentional, he later admitted that it was. The film's legacy as a queer classic was brilliantly explored in the 2019 documentary Scream Queen: My Nightmare on Elm Street, which examined both its thematic depth and the impact that it had on Patton's life thereafter. Number 8. The World's End. On the face of it, the third and final entry into Edgar Wright's esteemed Cornetto trilogy is a breezy, ridiculous sci-fi comedy in which a group of middle-aged men have their pub crawl interrupted by an inconvenient alien invasion. Except The World's End actually ends up being about much more than that, and that's likely why so many view it as inferior to the more crowd-pleasing and undeniably brilliant Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Though much of the film's drama centers around Gary King and his four pals accepting that they've drifted apart, it's really a literally sobering look at the destructive and hopeless power of alcoholism. While it's made clear from early on that Gary is a directionless 40-year-old man desperate to recapture the glory of his youth, we only learn the full extent of his troubles at the film's end, that he has little purpose beyond his next pint, and he's unhappy enough that he recently tried to take his own life. After all, it's no coincidence that Gary's quest involves downing 12 pints over the course of an evening, there also being 12 steps in the addiction recovery program. It's not the sunniest subject matter for a film marketed as a broader comedy on the level of the other Cornetto movies, but it does lend the film a crushing, unexpected emotional weight, with Gary's struggles played quite superbly by Simon Pegg. In fact, in recent years, Pegg confirmed that Gary's arc was informed by his own struggles with alcoholism earlier on in his career. He said, "I felt like I was kind of telling people with that movie, because that's what addiction is like. It's like you've grown a second head and all it wants to do is destroy itself, and it puts that ahead of everything else. Your marriage, your children, your job." Number 7. Joe versus the Volcano. In fairness, you can't really be blamed for having low intellectual expectations for a film called Joe versus the Volcano, in which the titular protagonist learns that he's dying of a rare disease and so accepts a financial offer to become a human sacrifice by hurling himself into a volcano on a remote Pacific island. From its title to its poster to its trailer, Joe versus the Volcano looks like a broader-than-broad screwball rom-com. Yet considering that it's written by Oscar, Tony and Pulitzer-winning writer John Patrick Shanley, who wrote Moonstruck and Doubt, we probably should have expected a bit more from this, and indeed it's far from your run-of-the-mill multiplex rom-com, likely explaining why it underperformed at the box office. Beyond its more obvious observations about living life to the fullest, Joe versus the Volcano is also a fascinating meditation on mortality and how we in the Western world process death, especially if we're given advanced knowledge of it. Moreover, it has a lot to say about capitalism. Joe works a soul-destroying job at the start of the film, one he quits upon receiving his diagnosis, and is ultimately agreeing to jump into a volcano to appease a wealthy industrialist, who wishes to mine the island for manufacturing materials. For a film that sounds so thoroughly silly, it has so much more going on beneath the surface. Number 6. Gone Girl. Now, there are those who surely watched David Fincher's Gone Girl and came away feeling that it was basically a well-directed adaptation of a slushy, trashy airport novel thriller, an upmarket entry into the, air quotes, women be crazy, boiler bunny subgenre, right? Except Gone Girl is a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, using the slick sheen of its familiar thriller setup and glossy production values to conceal a more biting satire on modern relationships, gender roles, the media, and the narratives we concoct of our lives to present to the outside world. Now, none of this will be illuminating to media-literate viewers who engaged with the film, yet it may have flown somewhat over the head of popcorn-munching crowds sitting tight for a frothy murder mystery. It was, in the very least, kept firmly out of the movie's marketing. It's easy to picture a lesser version of Gone Girl that eschews the brilliantly catty social commentary and simply plays its premise as a straight, twisty thriller. And you know what? We would be so much worse off if that happened. Number 5. Rubber. Now, to anyone who took a look at the 2010 horror comedy Rubber and dismissed it as a goofy, schlocky movie about a sentient tire that kills people with telekinetic powers, well, they missed out on a movie that turned out to be surprisingly insightful and introspective. Right from its opening sequence, the film lays out its mission statement, with Lieutenant Chad literally addressing the audience and explaining to them that in this movie, everything is committed to the principle of no reason. The director of the film is basically making fun of both cinema and of life, where people so often expect to find a neat, tidy logic to things that happen, no matter that insane, absurd things, like say a rubber tire becoming sentient, can occur for no discernible reason at all. This is of course evident to anyone who sat down and watched the movie, because here again the director literally spells it out for you, but considering how many watched the trailer and just thought they had the movie pegged without watching it, it is a much more intriguing beast indeed. Number 4. Office Space. On a superficial level, Mike Judge's cult classic comedy Office Space is a broad, hilariously cartoonish satire of modern office life, a cathartic commentary on the soul-eroding drudgery of working for an uncaring employer in any field. Yet go below the surface, and Judge's film is really one of the finest existential comedies of its era, and that's precisely why it struck with such a strong emotional chord with entire generations of people stuck working mundane jobs. Even the undeniably silly setup, in which disgruntled protagonist Peter is hypnotized into a permanently relaxed state, feeds into a wider running thematic about the ways we choose to spend our precious and brief time on this planet. The hyper-bureaucratized nature of the company where Peter works, meanwhile, feels practically Kafka-esque, transforming a blandly mundane office environment into a nightmarish hellscape which threatens to swallow the soul of any who touch it. While Office Space could have settled for being a cheeky comedy about how much working life can suck, it dares to explore the very basic essence of being human and being alive, the pursuit of happiness in all of its painful discovery and inevitable compromise. Number 3. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. As youngsters, watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, most of us likely accepted the story as an imaginative fantasy tale about a poor boy visiting Willy Wonka's wondrous chocolate factory, and that was about it. As adults, though, we know better. The awe-inspiring appeal of Wonka's outfit, the rivers of chocolate, the promise of a lifetime supply of all the good stuff, all are part of his plan to find a worthy successor to his empire who isn't so easily seduced by vices. The other children on the tour reveal themselves to be greedy, gluttonous, and excessively ambitious, causing each of them to fail Wonka's test. And while the film isn't particularly subtle about this, I mean, the Oompa Loompas bloody well sing about it all the time, it isn't something that necessarily is immediately digested by younger viewers. While Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is best remembered for its songs, its wacky production value, and Gene Wilder's inimitable performance, it's ultimately far more than just mere wish fulfillment. It massages genuine life lessons into absurdly entertaining and an entrancing whole. Number 2. Drag Me to Hell. There's no shame in taking Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell at face value, because it certainly seems like that's precisely what you're supposed to do. It's a delightfully twisted horror comedy in which loan officer Christine refuses a loan extension on an elderly woman's home, and so the woman then places a curse upon her, which will see Christine pulled to the depths of hell within 3 days. And viewed solely through that lens, Drag Me to Hell absolutely delivers on its promises. Yet a fan theory posted that the IMDb message board shortly after the film's release compellingly argues that the entire movie is actually a metaphor for battling an eating disorder. For starters, we rarely see Christine eating even when others are around her, and even when she does eat, she'll often lie about it, like telling her boyfriend that she's lactose intolerant to avoid eating ice cream, only for him to catch her eating it later on. There's also a picture of a younger Christine who weighed considerably more, and so much of the film's horror is centered around food, mouths, and vomit. The old lady puking maggots and then shoving her arm into Christine's mouth, and an eye appearing in a cake as she goes to eat it. Now, some versions of the theory even claim that all of the supernatural events in the film are hallucinations as a result of her hunger, but even if you don't go that far, it's clear that Raimi conceived of this film as an allegory of sorts for the dangers of eating disorders. And number 1, The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot. The hilariously titled The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot sounds like a bottom-shelf, low-budget B-movie in its bones, and the film does indeed revolve around a man, Calvin Barr, who killed Hitler in his youth and is now tasked with hunting down Bigfoot. But this is a far more thoughtful, even emotional piece of work than anyone would ever glean from its willfully absurd title. Somewhat reminiscent of Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, this is a slow, mournful meditation on the origins and impact of violence on those who commit it, as Barr reckons with the fact that he's now just an old man whose past is littered with regret. It's surprisingly heavy stuff for the movie its moniker suggests, and yet Sam Elliott's rich performance combines with sharp filmmaking from the director to ensure that it manages to be a well-drawn character piece while also delivering on the unhinged expectations of its title. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 insane movies, way deeper than they look. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, you can go follow me over on Twitter, where it's RetroJ, but the O is a 0, or Instagram, where it's the same handle, RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there, my friend. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. I hope you're treating yourself well with love and respect, my friend, because you deserve all of the best things in life, alright? Like love, happiness, and success. And I know I go on about this at the end of these videos, but I just want you to go out there and be kind to yourself, to live a healthy and happy life. You are a massive ledge. Now go out there and absolutely smash it. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.